I, Vice Chair Matthew Roselle, call the rescheduled Plumbing Board meeting of February 27th, 2020 to order at 1:31 p.m. Debbie, could you please call the roll call?
Chair Travis Argue is excused. Vice Chair Matt Roselle.
Here.
Thank you, Matt. Craig Anderson.
Here.
Corey Fraser is excused. Melissa Gett.
Here.
Molly Keller.
Here.
Joe LeBeau.
Here.
Mr. Acting Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we have any changes to the agenda? 3. Hearing none, I rule the agenda and the order of business approved. Are there any changes to the draft minutes? Nope, hearing none. I, Vice Chair Roselle, rule the draft minutes of December 19th, 2019 final. The date of the next scheduled meeting is April 16th, 2020. And policy analysts, this is for the public comment. Do we have anybody who has not signed up for public comment that wants?
Do not have any members signed up.
Okay. All right, program update.
Thank you, Vice Chair Roselle, members of the board. For the record, my name is Andy Skinner, Plumbing Chief for the State of Oregon Building Codes Division. First of all, I'd like to thank personally the committee members that took time out of their busy schedules to come go over the code and review the amendments and the current code that that the board moved forward, which was the 2021 UPC. So we had Brad Sinnekit. He chaired the committee. We had Curtis Gillette. We had Dan Somelia, Jed Sherman, Mackenzie James, Russell Hill, and Tyrone Bergen. Again, I want to thank each and every one of them for taking the time out to do that, because as everybody who's been involved in the code adoption process, you know, it can be, those days can be lengthy. So thank them for all their hard work. Also, I'd kind of like to introduce, we have 2 new investigators that the division has hired for the enforcement, and as being one of the licensing boards, I think it's important that we communicate when we bring on some new people into the enforcement and let you know who we have. So we have Eric Jeffords back there. He comes to us out of Alaska. He was a state trooper up in Alaska. And then we have Leah Santana, who comes from us out of California, and I think the last job was Children and Family Services that she did investigations for down there, and we're happy to have both of them with us. So as soon as we get them up to speed, we'll assign some areas for them, and then they'll go out and start doing investigations and licensing checks. So I want to thank them for coming on board. Also, we have Mark Long has left the division and he's went to the Home Builders Association. And we have Lori Graham has come in as the interim administrator for the Building Codes Division. Lori comes to us from Workman's Comp. She's been there for a few years. She worked in Portland for a while, for about 10 years. She worked in Portland, and then she worked for the division as well. She was with us, I'm not sure how many years she was with us, but probably about 5, 6 or so. And she was manager of PTS for a while. She managed e-permitting for a while. And so she's very familiar with our industry and what we do here at Building Codes. So we're happy to see her come in and fill that position for short term until we get a permanent administrator. So with that said, I think that concludes the update for everything. Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Andy. And now we have Nick Howard, contested case representative, Enforcement Services.
Good morning, board members and Chair Roselle. Through the chair, my name is Nick Howard. For the record, Nick Howard, and I'm with the Building Codes Division. I'm a contested case rep. Agenda item 3B consists of consent orders that we have entered into on your behalf with plumbers since our last meeting. All of the amounts that we have noticed, the respondents are consistent with the previous precedent and with our penalty matrix. We would ask that you all look them over. Have any questions, let me know. And then we would ask that you would adopt them and issue an order adopting these consent orders and thereby making them final orders. So, have any questions at this time?
No question.
Questions? We need a motion for this.
Craig Anderson, through the chair, motion that we adopt the consent orders as written and approve them.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, hearing none. We that. And the summary enforcement cases?
Great, yes. So this agenda item doesn't require any board action. These are basically defaults. And what's happened with these were previously reinstated amounts from consent orders that we had entered into. The respondents hadn't made payments. Thus, the suspended amount became due. They're final orders. It's just, that's why they're there. If you have any questions, ask me. Otherwise, we're good.
All right, any questions for Nick? All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and there were no communications or appeals or unfinished business, so we will move on to the new business. And I'll ask Andy to start us off on.
Tyler will first start us off with kind of reading the memo, but
Through the chair, Tyler Glaze, policy analyst for the Building Codes Division. We have a memo in your packet. It's agenda item 7. Subject line of the 2020 Oregon Plumbing Specialty Code Review Committee recommendation regarding adoption of the 2021 Uniform Plumbing Code with amendments. It's requesting action stating that the OPSC Review Committee requests the board review and approve the provisions of the 2020 Oregon Plumbing Specialty Code and recommend the administrator proceed with rulemaking. To give you some background, the OPSC Review Committee completed an analysis of the 2021 Uniform Plumbing Code changes, existing Oregon Code amendments, statewide interpretations, and alternate method rulings. Committee met 3 times, beginning January 14th, 2020, finalizing recommendations for the board on January 28th, 2020. The board packet includes a document that summarizes the findings and recommendations of the 2020 OPSC Review Committee. The committee, the actual action of the committee recommends that the board adopt the 2021 Uniform Plumbing Code as the base model code with amendments and forward the code to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption. The committee also requests that the board recommend adoption of the low-rise residential plumbing provisions of the code to the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board, which will review those revisions at its additional meeting scheduled for Wednesday, March 18th, 2020. And there are really 3 main choices here. The first is to approve the committee's recommendation to adopt the proposed code language that the committee proposed and forward it to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption, with the finding that the added cost, if any, is necessary to the health and safety of the occupants or the public or necessary to conserve scarce resources. In addition, recommend that the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board approve the proposed language where it relates to low-rise residential plumbing provisions. The second option is to amend and approve the committee's recommendation to adopt the amended code language and forward, which is any of the code language that might be amended, and forward it to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption, with the finding that the added cost, if any, is necessary for the health and safety of the occupants or the public or necessary to conserve scarce resources. In addition, recommend that the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board approve the amended language where it relates to low-rise residential plumbing provisions. The third and last but not least option is to disapprove the committee's recommendation regarding the proposed code language, which would continue use of the 2017 OPSC.
Okay, so we have the code change proposals that the committee went through and are sending to the board. And, you know, what I would like is to go through that, just kind of do a highlight of each section. And
okay.
I think some of these, has everyone had a chance to review these changes?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have specific questions, as Andy's going through that chapter, we can bring those up at that point. We also will we hear testimony if
I think we had somebody
Okay.
sign in. I'll grab it. I think that's what we got. All right. So thank you, Chair Rozell. For the record, Andy Skinner. So as mentioned, there's a matrix before the board today of what the recommendations are from the committee. I would kind of like to, and of course it's up to the board, I'd like to just kind of hit the high points. But please ask questions if you have any. We can back up, we can go forward. We have the full, complete document up on the board for review as well. So as we go through, if you've got a question about a section, we can bring it up and talk about what that new language is. But I feel there's a few things that are of importance enough to just kind of highlight, and then again, jump right in if you've got anything. Now, I believe there was somebody signed in to speak on an agenda item, so we'll wait until we get to that code section, if that's all right. All right, so in Chapter 3, there wasn't a lot of stuff that really jumped out for a substantive change, but if you got any questions, I'd be happy to speak to any of those. The only one I do want to just kind of zero in on is number 2, dead legs. There was some discussion on dead legs. This is new language out of the model code. And through that discussion, which was quite lengthy, in fact, it got bumped to another meeting time so people could do some research. And some of the committee members did reach out to some laboratories that have done, and to some universities that have done investigations and also research on dead legs, and came back with they're really not a major issue. So the committee decided just to leave language in there because it was model code language. It really is only going to be applicable to existing applications where they go in and do some remodel or some adjustment. So I just kind of wanted to point that one out. Next one, Chapter 4. The first one, number 4, as the board approved the water conserving fixtures. They're coming back into the code now. There was one minor adjustment there, and there was a footnote added to allow the fluctuation for kitchen sink faucets that have sprayers to go from 2.2 to 1.8 and then back to 2.2. So that's been added since the board had approved the water conserving fixtures. And the reason for that is we got quite a bit of feedback from the manufacturers stating that that's what they've manufactured their faucets to, and it does meet the EPA requirements. So we felt that was kind of an important piece to slide in there. That was really about the only change on that one. I'd like to kind of jump down to number 7. Number 7, the finished curb. All the Oregon amendment was taken out that talked about the wet room, because after the committee had some conversation about it, the code already allows a shower without a dam or a threshold. So now any shower within the confines of the code for 30-inch circle, or minimum 32 by 32, 1024 square inches, can be built without a threshold or a curb or a dam. So I felt that was kind of an important one. Turn to the next page. Number 15. This is a new Oregon amendment. So if you could do 605.12, if you could punch on 605.12. It'd be in Chapter 6. There it is. So the current code cycle that we're in right now in the 2017 OPSC has language in Chapter 3 that talked about UV protection from plastic piping. That was moved out of the 2021 UPC, and it was put in a couple of different sections. One section is here, 605.12, and another section, Chapter 9, just invent terminations. So now there's no requirement for painting other than those two sections for protection from UV. So the committee decided to rescind the interpretation that the division currently has out on the website. And that will go away after the October 1st, 2020 adoption. So really, there is no requirement now for that protection, so I kind of wanted to point that out. And that was number 18. I'll back up to number 16. We don't need to bring that one up on the board, but the tracer wire requirements have went from 18 down to 14. That was kind of a big one. It wasn't a huge fiscal impact. Now I'd like to go to number 22. And Debbie, if you could punch on 608.5. Thank you. This is for the T&P from the water heater discharge piping. So the committee decided to go back to model code language on this one. And so what it really gets rid of is it gets rid of the pan being a point of discharge. And now it allows other materials that meet the 210 or the 150 degree requirements to be utilized for that. So that gets rid of the CPVC that was in there that for its listing doesn't meet the 210 degrees. It's only approved for 180 degrees. So that was a significant change. There's some other different language in there that I know it's kind of hard to see up there, but those were the two major issues that it really changed. Was the material allowance. It really allows more flexibility for material, because currently we're only allowed 3 types of material for that discharge piping: galvanized, copper, and CPVC, which CPVC doesn't meet the listing requirements. Thank you, Debbie. And then the pan being taken away. So after some discussion, the committee also, because model code doesn't allow the garage to be a point of discharge, we put back in a new organ amendment to allow the garage to still be a point of discharge for that T&P valve as well. So those were kind of the 3 changes there. Again, if you have any questions, please
Do you want us
ask.
to ask why we're going through?
What's that?
Do you want us to ask why you're going through if we come upon it?
Absolutely, yeah. That
Okay.
way we're kind of on that subject.
Okay, I actually have a question.
Okay.
Just wanted to, about leak detection devices, on number 19. It just looks like is it referring to those types of devices that you connect to like a sink or your house, and if your home has a leak, then it picks up that leak and maybe shuts down your water system? Is that what that one is referring to?
Yes.
I know that's kind of a new thing that's come out, so it's a new listing for that needs to fall under this in order to have it inside your home or business.
Or in the distribution system, yes. And that's exactly what it is, Melissa. And you're right, it's starting especially to become more popular in rest areas and structures that are not either always open or seasonal, or there's not people there on a regular basis. So this just makes sure that it meets either the NSF 61 or the NSF 14 requirements for potable water distribution systems and some of those others.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
All right, I'd like to jump down to 28. And Debbie, if you could go to that one that says T703.2 in chapter 7. There we go. Okay, so can you, there, yeah. Oh, it's kind of hard to see. So there's been quite a few changes here that really aren't prevalent when you first look at this table, but there's some footnote changes that is really going to change quite a bit of stuff, and really just opens up for savings in sizing of these systems, but it does change the grade on 3-inch back to 1/4 inch. So 1.5 inch in commercial applications now can have up to 8 laboratories installed on 1.5 inch vertical or horizontal. That's a big, huge change. Footnote 5 has added, has been taken away from the 3-inch. And then also water closets now on 3-inch pipe. You can have up to 5 water closets now on a horizontal and a vertical 3-inch pipe, which is a huge savings. And of course, as most of you have known that are out there in the industry, they're doing inspections or installations on a retro when somebody wants to add a bathroom to an existing house and they've only got a 3-inch sewer. That's been a huge fiscal impact to the consumer. And also, it's been a challenge for local jurisdictions to know what to do and how to go out and inspect that, because we have that language that talks about existing systems not being overloaded. And so there's been some struggles there. And so that I think is a great change there. And then at the bottom, there was another footnote added. And I think we just kind of bumped down the laboratories, and that's where that laboratory one is for the 8. So no more 1/8 inch on 3-inch because of the additional water closets on there now. Now we get 5 water closets on a horizontal, and now we get 8 laboratories on 1.5 inch in a commercial application. So that really changes things quite a bit, and the savings side of it is. So, any questions on that?
Andy,
Yes.
was it water conservation ultimately that drove that?
Well, I think water conservation is one, and also IAPMO did an extensive study on low-flow water closets specifically, and 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch grade on 3-inch, 4-inch piping, and they found out that really it wasn't a movement of the solids in there, and that there's enough water that flows through it that will take it all down. What they did find, though, that part of the problem was with the new, believe it or not, toilet paper that's being designed is more absorbent. So when you have less water, it's not breaking it down as much. But it really wasn't a problem with, and they went all the way down to a gallon on that test too. So that did come from that as well, yeah. Number 29, we don't need to go to that one, Debbie. It pulls out the double sanitary T in 704.2 because what the committee found, and I've been vetting this to the industry and asking at the chiefs meetings, how many people are still utilizing the sanitary crosses in 704.2. It doesn't eliminate them from 706, but just in back-to-back, and nobody's really using them anymore. So this is one of those areas that was kind of outdated. The industry wasn't doing it, so we just kind of took out that Oregon amendment. One of the things we tried to do was clean up a lot of the old Oregon amendments that are really not applicable anymore, and then go back to model code as much as we could. I think that's best for the industry. It's also gives you as installers and inspectors and designers out there the opportunity to look on IAPMO's website and see what they've done for interpretations, because it's model code language. So next one I'd like to point out is number 30. There's been some changes in 707.4, which is our clean out section. The committee looked at bringing back as many interpretations into the code as possible. So we've got an old interpretation out there on double cleanouts, and that was no higher than 3 feet on the riser and no offsets in that riser. Now that language has been brought back into the code. The other thing that you'll find in that whole section of cleanouts is they added the kitchen sink. Now kitchen sinks require a clean out no matter where they're located in the structure, whether they're 2nd floor, 3rd floor, 10th floor, just like the urinals in the last code adoption cycle. And then there was the organ amendment that went back to the 20-foot accessibility for the cleanouts to the crawl hole. And that was in the path to it, could not exceed 20 feet. Well, the committee talked about and decided to pull out that organ amendment and go back to model code language there, and it's a 5-foot maximum from the crawl hole to any cleanout, okay? So that's in there as well. And then the clearances on the cleanouts was just 24 inches in front or 18 inches in front. Now it's side to side, top to bottom, and in front. So that's going to change kind of design-wise what the installer is going to do out there for cleanouts. Another big one I'll point you to is number 33. And number 33 is our section 715.3. This section was for the rehabilitation of existing sanitary sewers, and it allowed pipe bursting, it allowed CIPP. CIPP is still there and is still allowed, but on the national level, the model code had put in their language to not allow cast iron to be CIPP rehabilitated, which is your resin. And so there's a new organ amendment here that took that language out to still allow cast iron pipe to be rehabilitated with the CIPP. There was a lot of discussion at the national level on that, and part of it was the Cast Iron Institute, cast iron manufacturers wouldn't warranty the product if it was rehabilitated. After discussion with the committee and with the industry too, and also what's currently been in play for the last couple of code cycles, these cast iron systems have been rehabilitated. Usually at the time of rehabilitation, they're probably beyond the point of the manufacturer going to warranty the product. So that is an organ amendment that just allows that. We'll jump down to Chapter 9. And I'd like to go through Chapter 9, and then I believe, John, you came in and signed up for the proposals? Okay. So 37, 906.1 is that other section in the code that talked about protection from UV degradation. And that section was pulled out because it was only there for the 6 to however many feet that it is penetrated, but nowhere else. It wasn't for rainwater leaders or conductors. It wasn't for piping on the outside of the building or anything. So to be consistent, the committee decided to pull out that language because it wasn't required anywhere else. The other thing, I'll jump down to 39. The committee decided to put back in Appendix B for clarification for designing of combination waste and vent systems, because about 2 code cycles ago, they took out the half figures in the table for pipe sizing. And for sizing per section 910, if you take out the half sections in Chapter 7, it really upsized everything one pipe size when designing and installing a combination waste and vent system. So Appendix B got put back in for that purpose, to bring back those half sizes for designing a combination waste and vent system and not adding that extra cost. And then number 40, model code took out, or actually added, language to only allow water closets, showers, floor drains, and bathtubs, I believe, to be horizontally wet bedded. Before, it was not specific on what it said. It said 8 fixtures. So now they've kind of condensed that to only those fixtures can utilize the circuit vent for its vent. So that's kind of a big change in in how it's going to be designed out there, how you're going to look at it as an inspector, and what fixtures can be on that system, utilizing the system for a vent. It doesn't change all those other additional fixtures that can be tied into the system. They can still tie into the system as per the minimum requirements of the code. So that kind of concludes everything on the matrix for Chapter 9.
I have a question. Do you know the reasoning why that they are only allowing those certain fixtures that we changed from that at circuit venting? Why we switched from all fixtures to just those limited fixtures?
All the research that I have done really didn't narrow it down to why. You know, I can speculate, but I don't really want to do that. It's just kind of going back to the model code language. The one thing they pulled out, I'm sure, like they did in the horizontal wet venting, is urinals, because of the type of fixture it is and the problems that can be had with that. But the other reasonings, not quite sure, no.
Okay.
Any other questions so far? Okay.
All right. John, if you want to come up, and we have 3 proposals that came in last week, and if you would like to speak on those, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Plumbing Board for the opportunity to propose the following 3 items, each of which pertain to vents for sanitary drainage systems. Hopefully you've had a chance to go over these, but I will be running through them here and would be happy to answer any questions you may have on them. Some of the information in the first proposal is the outcome of a research project I had the opportunity to pursue with the World Plumbing Council in the United Kingdom last year. The recommendation of the first proposal is to move the single stack vent system from the Oregon Appendix to Chapter 9. The single stack vent system relies on an oversized ventilated stack to alleviate pressure differentials and maintain water seals within the trap. The main principle is that the fixtures may be installed without individual vents, provided that they are within a certain distance from the stack, eliminating issues with self-siphonage. The single stack was developed in 1911 in Boston, Massachusetts, and was further tested and developed in the UK in the 1950s. The single stack is now standard throughout Europe and Asia, as well as Australia, and is an approved method in about half of the United States. Testing has shown this method to match the performance and exceed the performance in some cases of conventional vented drainage systems with stack vents in terms of pressures developed within the stack, maintaining 1-inch water column at the fixture traps. When comparing the single stack to conventional stacks with individual fixture vents, which are not required to be vented at the top of the stack with an auxiliary vent until reaching 10 floors in height under the UPC and Oregon Plumbing Code. The single stack will demonstrate a significant increase in pressure performance. The UPC incorporated the single stack into the Alternative Methods Appendix in 2006, 6 years before the IPC, but has yet to transition this to Chapter 9 as an approved method. Transitioning the single stack vent system to the main body of the code will recognize this as a proven design option. In the attached document, you can see an example of the single stack design. Pressure flow profiles are also shown below from Transient Airflow and Building Drainage Systems by Dr. John Swafield, well known in the building drainage research field. So if you flip to, I believe it's page 3, you can see an example of the single stack right here designed according to the Oregon Appendix. One of the main features you'll notice here is that the lower 2 floors are required to connect separately from that single stack. And once that stack reaches 10 branch intervals or more, you are required to provide a parallel vent stack. And the impact of this proposal will primarily be seen in mid-rise multifamily buildings between 3 and 8 stories, with the potential to optimize drainage piping up to 40%. Given that plumbing accounts for up to 8% of total construction costs in multifamily buildings, this could aid in increasing affordability of housing in Oregon. The single stack will also enable one stack to serve an entire bathroom, which is particularly valuable for attenuating drainage noise in studio dwellings by moving stacks away from walls near sleeping areas. Unlike the Sovent system, which is commonly installed in Portland, this configuration relies on height and drainage fixture unit limitations and does not require proprietary aerator fittings. And for the second proposal item, I recommend retaining a portion of the current language in Oregon Plumbing Code regarding circuit venting. While the new verbiage for circuit venting in the UPC does generally establish better clarity on the subject, it goes further to prohibit circuit vents for urinals, floor sinks, lavatories, sinks, and many other fixtures without substantiation. The principles of circuit venting are well proven and not limited to the application of fixture types listed in the proposal, and have been permitted since circuit venting was first introduced into the Uniform Plumbing Code and the Oregon Plumbing Code in 2009. The limitations are carried over from the National Standard Plumbing Code, which was based on the American Standard Plumbing Code in 1955. Is that my time?
That is. We'll go ahead and finish this one up and then talk about three through those.
Thank you.
Or just let them finish.
Let's just let them finish.
And this is the only model plumbing code in the United States that still limits circuit venting to these specific fixtures. Technical justification, which was not provided by the submitter in the UPC Technical Committee, is merited before carrying over this limitation to other model codes. I recommend removing the fixture limitations as shown and accepting the proposal as modified. And for the last item, I propose extending the allowable trap-to-vent distances for horizontal wet vented fixtures. As horizontal wet venting has become common on the West Coast, it can be observed that many horizontal wet vent installations feature roundabout configurations from the lavatory to the bathtub in order to meet the 3.5-foot trap-to-vent distance shown in Table 10-1 for inch and a half fixture drains. The National Bureau of Standards, which created the basis for the UPC plumbing code under Dr. Roy Hunter, studied horizontal wet venting systems to verify their performance for the inclusion into plumbing codes. Their report on horizontal wet vent systems found that an 1.5 inch bathtub drain sloped at 1/4 inch per foot may have a length of up to 6 feet between the horizontal wet vent from the lavatory and the trap weir of the bathtub without impacting the water seal depth through self-siphonage. They also found that increasing the diameter of the fixture drain from the bathtub allowed a distance of 8 feet. Recognizing the results of this study will reduce unnecessary horizontal piping, thereby increasing drain line performance and optimizing the use of drainage piping. An example schematic has been provided in the attached document. And if you flip to the next page, you can see in the diagram to the left, the fixture drain acting as the wet vent runs toward the bathtub in order to keep the bathtub drain while they're within the required trap to vent distance. This has presented challenges using this configuration, particularly in wood construction. And this is the existing requirements for trap to vent distances. And the diagram to the right shows the bathtub fixture drain extending across the bathroom without requiring a winding wet vent configuration. And on the next page, you'll see an example of an installation that in order to comply with the current code recommendations, the bathtub fixture drain was increased in diameter from 1.5 inches to 2 inches. and the lavatory winded towards the bathtub, showing additional piping. So the main impacts of this code proposal, this would also allow a bathroom, including in buildings that have wood frame construction, to utilize one stack for the entire bathroom. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions before he back down from the committee?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah, few questions. So, I'll take the third one first, proposal 3. So, just so I'm clear, I read through it a bit, and you're suggesting that we increase trap arm sizes. And I guess where I'm trying to fit it in is with just your last statement, where you said, what you just said, and how I interpret it is so that when you have a stack, that you can keep everything just off of that. It seemed like you were tying in horizontal wet venting with this, with having no vents, just with that
Oh, I
stack
see.
vent.
No, it would still require, this is still a horizontal wet
Still a
vent
horizontal wet
configuration.
vent, doesn't,
Giving that extra length, a lot of times in bathroom configurations where you have a bathtub across from the water closet and the lavatory, a lot of times it's more than 3.5 feet. And so what ends up needing to be installed is a separate stack for the bathtub. A lot of times that's right there next to the living unit, and in a studio living unit that could present drainage sounds during the night. Someone above is that fixture. So giving that additional length on there enables a wet vent to be used for the entire bathroom rather than just the water closet and the lavatory.
okay. And then, do you have these studies from Dr. Roy Hunter that shows these tests for 1.5 and 2-inch extensions of these drain lines?
Yes. The link right there on the first page takes you to that. There's just a nice little diagram. I don't know, can we pull that up? Okay.
So this link is the one that you're referring to here?
Yes.
But it's from the 1950s?
Correct.
Okay, is there anything recent that you know of, that studies have been done for this type of application?
A lot of, yes and no. The National Plumbing Program was terminated in the 80s, and most of the studies in the United States, at least, have been limited to manufacturer studies, and there hasn't been much of an incentive from manufacturers to reduce piping. So there haven't been any studies, at least within the past 20 years on this. But the principles have not changed.
Okay. That's all I have for proposal 3. For proposal 2, at least for myself, I would like to know the reason for switching from fixtures in general to these specified fixtures, and why IATMO changed to only allow those fixtures, because you said that was a UPC change, right? So I'd be curious to find out what the findings were for them to change this, because, you know, they vet all of their code changes, and there's usually a reason why. It would just be nice to know that before going into this any further for myself.
I had participated in the UPC technical process, and I had asked the same question because I was kind of curious as to where that was coming from, but I didn't get an answer, and it was accepted.
No, nobody answered your
No,
question.
no, it was not answered.
Seems strange. I mean, I think I would like the opportunity to at least check in with them and see why that's the case, so.
That code language comes from the 1955 American Standard Plumbing Code, which, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? So we have three options. We can either approve these with these proposals, or I'm sorry, we can approve everything as the committee recommended, or we can add in these proposals, which would take a motion, or we could just deny it and use the 2017. Do we have any motions or?
I myself would like to have a bit more information, and I'd also like to see those that invested so heavily of their time on the review committee to have some input on this.
Yeah, because they have not seen these
Right.
proposals, so.
If I may, through the chair, we do have Brad Sinnott here, who chaired the committee. If the board so chooses to ask any questions, Brad, I'm sure, is happy to come up and answer any of them as well. And Jed also served on that committee, too.
Did you guys have some time to digest this and do some homework?
I've got a couple of thoughts on them. John, I think we can call you up if we need anything else, so. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. Brad Sinnott, City of Hillsborough. We didn't have these, and it would have been nice because I too have some questions. I have a lot of respect for the World Plumbing Council and the work they do and all that. But this is in Appendix C and has been adopted as Oregon Code already. So it
talking
can
about
be used. I'm talking about
Proposal 1?
Proposal 1. So it's an engineered system, and I have done some work on that in some of the UPC committee things, and without guidance from an engineer, it's tough for a journeyman to come up with the correct application of that. So, and we have in 912, in the body of the Chapter 9, the reference that you can use in engineered systems. And then we have this in Chapter or Appendix C to point to a design then for your engineer to accept it as an equal and approved method. So without more study, I would like to leave it in the Appendix C. Granted, it's been there for a long time, but so is Appendix A. Just it's a good thing. It's not going anywhere. So as far as Appendix Proposal 2, I would like to know more about that as well. I think their silence raises some questions as to why. I can see some of the applications we've used in, let's say, a bank of labs is above the first floor, but it's similar applications. What's the difference where it's above ground, underground? They're not, it's a separate system from the floor system, different levels, but I think for the time being, I'd like to recommend just staying with the model code on this one. And then, until we know more about it. And then number 3, again, I'm a little bit hesitant. So these trap arm lengths are what we had in the CABO code. I don't remember if any of you have those. Essentially, it's based on at a 1/4 inch per foot. You've exhausted your distance. You've gone from invert elevation to top of pipe on 1.5 inches, and then on the 2-inch line, invert to the top of pipe. And so I think Uniform Plumbing Code backs that off a little bit, so you're maintaining that little air gap so that in compliance with 1002.4, your trap weir is not getting above the face of the vent. So they're giving you that little redundancy. Will there work? Probably. Dr. Hunter is one of my heroes. I wish there was more of his work around to read, But, For now, I would recommend keeping the well code, yeah.
Okay. And I also wanted to thank you for chairing the committee and Jed for working on the committee and all the committee members that put their time into that. I know everyone is extremely busy and it takes time out of your day to come down here and meet, and I appreciate all the work that everybody did. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would like to just ask, I don't know if this is appropriate time, but at some point, maybe you can consider some code change, continuing it, credit for the members that would apply to that were on that committee, so.
I know we've done that in the past. The appropriate way to do that is, but
You know,
does there need to be a,
Yeah, the board can
Proposal?
definitely do it now and add it to the minutes and the agenda, and
so I don't know if 8 hours is fair. I mean, we were here a little more than that, but still, it was,
it's just your drive time.
anyway, thank you.
Okay,
I would, though, just before, for clarity, are you asking for code change for CC, or are you asking for just code-related CR? Are you asking for rule and law? What exactly are you asking for the record?
Well, I would say code change,
Okay.
right?
So there's
Essentially what this is.
in rule, there's only a 4-hour requirement for code change, and there's a 4-hour requirement for rule and law, and then a 16-hour requirement for code-related. Again, just for clarity.
my recommendation would be to do the rule and law, because part of this is the rules and the laws that they're following, and then also the code change.
Yeah, 4 hours each,
If you're,
that'd be great, yeah.
I think that's what we did last code change cycle, was 4 rule and law and 4 code change.
we probably need a motion
Oh.
for that, I'm sorry.
Generally, we would memo that separately and we'd take
Okay.
it to your next meeting. so
Okay,
that-
we can do that.
So that there's notice, if that's not going to screw things up. And make sure that's on your.
Would that mess up the timing? I know the renewals are out and they have to be done by April 1st, I believe. So I don't know if that would affect you.
Personally, I'm okay. I've already renewed, but I don't know. We had some other journeymen on here, Russ Hill and Curtis and Tyrone. That
They were tight on hours.
Our next meeting
don't know.
is April
20th.
16th, okay, April 20th. April 16th.
Yep.
I'm guessing everybody's good on their hours. So I would propose that we roll it over to the next code cycle.
Okay.
But we can, so if you want to make that request for the next board meeting, or I'm not sure, I'm not used to all this, so.
Right.
Okay, so we'll get that on there. Thank you again.
Thanks.
So we need a motion either to adopt what the committee has done, adopt the proposals, or deny it and use the 2017. We have a motion?
Craig Anderson to the chair. May I extend to Jed if he had any comments on these pieces here? Yeah.
Yes, please, come on up.
I'm Jed Sherman. I work for the IATMO Group. However, I'm going to speak as Jed Sherman, the individual citizen of Oregon. Thank you for the privilege of allowing me to sit on the Code Change Committee, and I want to point out that Mac is also with us, who sat, and perhaps he also might have some perspective. For these 3 proposals, part of the reason I want to speak as an individual is maybe because I have some personal familiarity with it, because coming from Canada originally, the codes are a little different, so I've seen some of these concepts in action perhaps a long time ago. Proposal number 1, with the stack type venting, John is correct, it's been in the appendix for a long time. The natural progression is eventually it gets into the main body of the code, and I really don't know the reason that it hasn't moved forward. But speaking personally, we called it stack venting and modified stack venting back in Eastern Canada, and I've seen those systems installed correctly work and function safely, efficiently, and healthfully, as well as sanitary. Proposal number 2, the only reason I can think, and I'm willing to reach out to IATMO, to my bosses, to get whatever perspective I can get on how that change came about to one of our staff engineers, and I can send it through Andy, if you will, if that's an appropriate way, ask him for what was the reasoning behind those changes. The only thing I could offer is, I think the thinking was to keep all the fixtures on the same level. So if you have fixtures that are basically a below-the-floor drain, like a typical floor-mounted water closet, a bathtub, a floor sink, a stall-type urinal, those connections are all on the same level and essentially below the floor, whereas lavs and sinks and other fixtures are essentially above the floor. And I think it was trying to keep separate the above the floor and the below the floor and not have them mixed on the same line. That's my good faith guess there. And then proposal number 3, you know, those lengths and numbers, I think that the way those were generated was based on the 1/4 inch per foot trap arm lengths. And I think the not allowing the full trap arm length for 1.5 inches gives you 6 1/4 inch increments to get there. But then at that point, that leaves no more annular space above for airflow to move back and forth, which is, I believe, the reason that it was reduced back to the 42 inches or the 3'6". I have no longer got access to it, but at one point I actually saw the original testing, and I think Dr. Hunter was in it, and it's this grainy old film, and it had glass piping, and it showed different trap arm lengths with different slopes in glass piping, and it was very telling how the flow went and what the lack of air did to that trap seal. But I have no idea how to get at that anymore. I just remember it in the dark crevices of my mind from my plumbing apprenticeship. So I don't quite know what to say on that. So if you'd like, I can get some information from our staff engineer and see what substantiation came up with for the horizontal wet venting changes. And hopefully those perspectives help a little bit.
I think we can revisit that in the future and do an amendment or something down the road if we wanted to revisit those. I would like to know that information. So if you could do that, that would be great.
Will do.
Thank you.
And thank you also for the willingness to give some continuing education credit for next license cycle. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jed.
McKinsey, you're kind of hiding back there, but thank you as well for sitting on the committee. So, okay, so we need to make a motion one way or another.
Sounds like we need to move to table it.
No, I think we can just table the those proposals, and then we can come back. We can adopt this per the committee's recommendations, and then come back and look at those at a future date. Or we can just say we want to use the 2017 OPSC.
So you're talking about the approval of them, sorry.
But before we get there, I had a couple more items I'd like to just kind of, we stopped on 9 to bring John over and to give his explanation of the proposals that were submitted. I'll keep it brief. I'll just point everyone to 47. I want to make sure that this one gets discussed, and if there's any questions. 47 is Chapter 13. And Chapter 13 is our medical gas systems chapter. You don't see a lot in the matrix here because the board, if the board remembers, through the last code cycle, they put a work group together to go over Chapter 13, and they spent a lot of time reorganizing, organizing, deleting, adding, to make that a good solid chapter. There wasn't a lot of changes that had come from the national level through the NFPA document, but they have adopted, the model code adopted the 2018 NFPA document for the 2021. So everything that'll be in 13 is just moved forward to the 2018 NFPA document. Not a lot of changes there. There was some kind of restructuring more than anything. One of those restructures were they took the categories 1, 2, and 3, and they also assigned those to the dental facilities. So you have category 1, category 2, and category 3 in the dental facilities, but it doesn't change any of the installation requirements. The other thing that was in the 2018 and is also going to be moving forward in the 2021 NFPA document was CMT, which is the corrugated metal tubing. The National Code Body took that language out of the 2021 for Chapter 13. After discussion with the committee, it came back in as an Oregon amendment to allow CMT in Oregon for the 2020 OPSC. So that's an Oregon amendment that got put back in. Everything else was just pretty well kind of boilerplated over from the 18 on 13. So I just wanted to communicate that to the board so they were clear on that. So the CMT will be allowed. And kind of one of the reasons behind that Oregon amendment too, when it comes to Chapter 13 and the medical gas system industry, for us, it's plumbing statutorily, and so that's why we have Chapter 13. But there's also other organizations that have a part in that system. So you have the engineers who design the system, and they design to the NFPA document, which they'll design to the 2018 and then the 2021 when it's available. Then you have CMS, and CMS certifies those medical facilities for Medicaid and Medicare, and they certify to the NFPA document, the most current NFPA document. And then you have our piece of it for the plumbing, and that's Chapter 13. And then you have the verifier at the end. The verifier comes in and verifies to the most current NFPA document. So if we retain that language to not allow CMT to be utilized, then you would have these other three buckets, if you will, approving it through engineering design, through facility licensing, and then through verification. Then us in the middle here would say, no, you can't do it. And you can see kind of the conflict out there with that. So that's why the Oregon Amendment came in, to allow CMT to be used in the med gas. And it still has to be med gas certified for oxygen or whatever medical gas it's being used for. But that's the reason for that input. And so that's all I had. And I'll just kind of close out. Is there any additional questions? Well, you can take a moment to look over the matrix and make sure that we've answered any questions you got before you go to a decision.
Unless we get through the chair, I don't have any further questions on the matrix of the code change.
I'm good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we need a motion.
I'll make a motion. I make a motion to approve the committee's recommendation to adopt the proposed code language and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption. In addition, I recommend that the Residential Manufactured Structures Board approve the proposed language where it relates to the low-rise residential plumbing provisions. Is that right?
We need to add those finding language.
Need more? Oh, with the findings that the added cost, if there is any, is necessary to the health and safety of the occupants or the public, or necessary to conserve scarce resources.
All right. With the motion made, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion passes. And with the proposals, we'd like to have some more information on those, and we'll revisit those at one of the next board meetings, and then decide what to do at that point. So thank you again for coming in, explaining your proposals. So at this point, I think we are adjourned.